Morning, all. Going to read chapter 26 of Shepherd's Quest, book 1 of the Broken Key Trilogy. I don't know if you can hear it, but I got thunder going and I got rain going. Production value. Remember the, what was it? 9mm, 6mm? That movie with the kids and the train, the creature? Yeah. This makes me think of it. I'll tell you afterwards, so people who don't want to hear my story don't have to. So, chapter 26. Chadric sat on the narrow ledge that he'd been sitting on now for over an hour. The rivulet that ran through the opening had soaked him pretty good. Though he was already cold with teeth chattering, he still hadn't worked up the courage to enter the frigid water of the river. How much longer could he afford to sit there? Every minute sapped that much more warmth and energy from his body. If he waited much longer, he wouldn't have the strength to keep his head above water once he made his move. Despite that, he sat there cold, miserable, and alone. All the sadness at the loss of his master welled to the surface again. He put his head on his knees as the strong emotions got the best of him and sobbed. No tornadoes today, just this thunder, hopefully. Keep away from the rocks! His head jerked up as he looked up the river to where the voice came from. A light could be seen drawing closer. Paddle, man, he heard Chad yell. If this hits the rocks, it'll bust up. With hope rekindled, he climbed to his feet just as the source of light came into view. He saw the glow was from a lantern floating along the far side of the water. Three forms moved upon the water, and it took him only a split second to recognize his former comrades. They looked to be riding some kind of raft. Riyan! He yelled and began waving his arms. The person in the center of the raft, who looked to be Bart, turned and saw him there on his precarious ledge. Kevik! Bart yelled. The other two turned to see him in his bobbing orb. Riyan! Chad yelled. The rocks! Kevik watched as Riyan turned onto his back and used his feet to keep the current from bashing the raft onto the rocky wall. His feet kicked out of the wall in an attempt to push the raft back into the river. Then Kevik saw Bart take something and began twirling it over his head. Your goose spell! Bart yelled as the object he had been twirling suddenly sailed toward him. Kevik saw three packs that were tied together suddenly fly through the air in his direction. He quickly understood Bart's plan, and when they came close, covered them in the sticky goo. Splat! The goo-coated packs struck the wall not 2 feet downstream from him and stuck. Bart hung onto the rope as the current used the packs attached to the wall as a fulcrum. When the rope grew taut in Bart's hands, the raft was pulled from the far side of the river and began to draw closer to the others. Riyan, Bart hollered, get to the other side or we're going to hit. They saw the wall of the channel the river flowed through approaching fast and moved into position. Just as Riyan had done previously, they moved to the edge, approaching the wall and laid on their backs. When the raft was about to hit, they extended their feet to act as shock absorbers. The current swept the raft to the wall, but their feet provided enough cushioning to keep it from being smashed apart. At that point, the tension of the rope increased twofold, and the rope was almost torn from Bart's hand. He tried to pull the raft closer to Kevik, but the current was too strong. He saw Kevik standing there, his annoying bobbing spirit danced around him. You're going to have to come to us, he hollered. I can't hold this much longer. Kevik realized that if he were to join them, he would have to go now. He put the pack across his back and made ready to enter the water. 2 feet into the river. 2 feet of water separated where he stood and where the goo-coated packs were stuck to the wall. Hurry, Bart grunted. He stepped into the water and was immediately sucked beneath the surface. Panic set in. He flailed in an attempt to reach the surface. Staff in one hand, pack on his back that was quickly turning into a watery, dead weight. The current slammed him in the side of the channel. Suddenly, his head broke the surface. Gasping for air, he saw the rope above his head and reached up to to grab hold of it. The current pulled him back down, but not before his finger closed around the rope. He held onto the rope with a death grip as the current tossed him to and fro. His waterlogged pack worked against his attempts to breach the surface. Finally, his head broke through again. He heard Bart yell, "The staff!" What? He hollered back, but then the water sucked him under once more. Still holding onto the rope and the staff, he managed to once more get his head back above the water. "Go of the staff," he heard when he broke the surface. Then he realized Bart was trying to say, "Let go of the staff." But this was his master staff, given to him just before he had died. How could he just let it go? Then the current sucked him below the surface again. It was all he could do to simply get back to fresh air. That was when he realized that if he didn't let go, he wouldn't reach the raft. Against the pull of the current, he was going to need both hands on the rope. "Forgive me, master," he said as he let go of the staff and gripped the rope with both hands. As the staff floated away, he worked his way down the rope to the raft. He heard Bart grunting as he worked to keep the current from taking him. Moving as fast as he could, he reached the raft. "Get on," said Bart. "But be careful. This wood isn't going to hold under your full weight." Nodding understanding, Kevin placed both hands on the raft and pulled himself up. Crack! His left hand broke one of the boards, and the river just about sucked him away when his grip on the raft faltered. Panic set in until both hands were once again holding onto the raft. Then he calmed himself by a sheer force of will and struggled to climb on board once more. A little slower this time, he inched his way on top until all but his lower legs were still in the water. "Cancel the spell," Bart yelled. Mumbling the words, Kevin dispelled the goo holding the packs to the wall. Then he felt the current begin dragging the raft downriver once more. "Thanks," he said to them. "Later," Bart said as he hauled the packs back onto the raft. "Keep your eyes open for any possible rocks or anything else we may run into." "Right," Kevin said. He remained where he was and turned onto his back like the others. He scanned for possible dangerous spots while Chad and Riyan continued working to keep the raft from striking the wall. For several minutes, the current carried them on until something from the opposite side of the river entered the lantern's light and caught his attention. It looked like a wooden dock. "Bart!" he yelled, then directed Bart's attention to the dock. Bart nodded and said, "We need to get to it." He sat up on the makeshift raft and started twirling the three waterlogged packs over his head. Crack, snap. Beneath him, he could feel and hear the planks about to give way. Ignoring the aged wood's warning, he hollered, "Goose bell!" Then with a final impetus, he launched the packs toward the approaching dock. When the packs reached halfway there, Kevin cast a spell. The packs hit the wall with a splat a little upstream of the dock. Then, just like before, the river used it as the fulcrum and swung the raft toward the dock side of the river. Chad and Riyan scrambled to the other side of the raft and reached it a second before the raft struck the wall. Using their legs, they kept the raft a safe distance away. "Kevin, you're going to have to help me pull the raft closer." They were now 10 feet downriver of the dock. Crack! The wood beneath Bart gave out with another threatening pop as the pressure he exerted against the raft to prevent the river from taking it was now being focused on the board his feet were braced against. Kevin moved over until he was in position and grabbed the rope. He and Bart then pulled on the rope to slowly bring the raft to the dock. When the raft came abreast of the dock, Riyan and Chad worked their legs to keep the raft from smashing against the dock's pilings. "Okay, Kevin," Bart said, "get on the dock, but be careful, it may not hold." Nodding, Kevin worked across the raft to the edge of the dock. Crack! "And hurry!" Bart saw the board he had his feet braced against begin to come apart. "Just hold for a little bit longer," he said to the board. Once Kevin made it onto the dock, he told Riyan to go next. Riyan grabbed the lantern, then worked his way from the raft to the dock. By this time, Kevin had already made it to the stone landing on the other side. It made it safely. And working fine until now. Once Riyan was on the dock and was making his way to the landing, it was Chad's turn. "But it's going to hit the dock," Chad hollered to Bart. His feet even now were pressed against one of the dock's pilings as he worked to maintain the foot of space between the raft and the dock. "I know," Bart replied. "Can't be helped. Just get on the dock." No sooner had Chad removed his feet and began moving along the raft to the dock side than the current slammed the side of the raft into the dock. They heard the wood begin splintering, and even before he reached the dock, One of the rear planks broke off and was carried away by the current. Bart continued holding the rope, the strain on his arms becoming quite bad. Between what he had done when Kevin joined them and what he did here, his muscles were a knotted mass of pain. Frankly, he was surprised that he'd been able to hold on for as long as he had. He watched Chad's progress, and when he saw him leave the raft and make the dock, he sighed with relief. Crack! A large chunk of the raft behind him splintered off after striking forcefully against the dock. He glanced back and saw there was only one more plank behind him. The loss of that section of the raft slightly eased the pressure being exerted on his arms. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw Riyan moving across the wooden dock toward the rope in an attempt to help him. Riyan, stop! The last thing he wanted was for the situation to worsen by Riyan breaking through the aged wood and falling into the river. Riyan paused as he turned to Bart. Then a loud cracking was heard, and Ryan's left foot suddenly broke through. Chad was quick to his side and led him a hand back onto the stone landing. The three of them turned their gaze to where Bart sat upon the raft. His feet were braced against the wood, and he was holding the rope for all he was worth. Bart lifted a foot from where it was braced against the raft and felt the raft suddenly shift under him. He moved the foot closer to the end of the raft, then did the same with the other. Only two more planks separated him from the edge. One by one, he worked his way closer. Hang on a second. Crack, snap. All of a sudden, the raft disintegrated and he was in the water. He held onto the rope as a current dragged him under. Holding on with one hand, he used his other to bring him back to the surface. Grab my hand, he heard Riyan holler when his head broke through. Looking up, he saw Riyan at the edge of the dock, reaching out his hand. He tried to grab the hand, but the current pulled him under once more. When he finally made it back to the surface, Ryan's hand was still outstretched. Again, he tried to reach it, and this time Riyan managed to grab hold and pulled him onto the dock. Bart turned onto his back and gasped, relieved that he was safely out of the river. He handed the rope to Riyan. Thanks, he said. Don't thank me until you're safely on the landing, Riyan said. He held out his hand to help Bart up. Bart took the hand and started to get to his feet. Crack! The wood beneath them was beginning to give way. Move! They heard Chad yell. Realizing they didn't have much time, Riyan and Bart scrambled for the landing. Snap! Crack! The dock disintegrated under them. Riyan was the first to make the landing, and just as Bart reached it, the dock completely collapsed into the river. Bart cried out as he lost his grip and felt his feet into the water. Hit the water. Kevin dove for him and grabbed his arm before the current could drag him away. Then with Chad and Ryan's help, they pulled Bart onto the landing. He lay there a moment, barely having the strength to move. Riyan came and knelt down by his side. Guess what? He asked. What? Bart replied. His heart had finally quit racing. Riyan pointed behind him to the far side of the landing and grinned. Another passage. Let me have some rest first. Let me rest first, Bart told him. No problem there, he said. We need to dry out anyway before we all catch our death. Kevik had already canceled the goose spell, adhering their packs to the wall. The rope had been pulled in, and he was in the process of emptying the saturated packs. Getting up, Riyan had Chad help him in tearing apart the remnants of the pier. Little of it remained, though. Most of it was now on its way down the river. At least there was enough left to build a fire. Once the packs were emptied and the contents set out to dry, Kevik came to sit by Bart while the other two worked at collecting the wood. Thank you for taking the time to rescue me. That's all right, Bart replied. Couldn't very well leave you there all alone. He saw a bit of sadness in Kevik's eye and said, Sorry about your staff. Kevik shrugged. I'm sure Aller would have understood. A pile of wood grew in the middle of the landing as Ryan and Chad continued tearing chunks and pieces from the remaining sections of planks and pilings. When they had a sufficient quantity, Ryan stacked the smaller, driest bits in a loose pile. Then he put one of the smaller pieces in the flame of the lantern until it caught fire. He placed it beneath the stack. It took him 3 separate attempts before the wood pile continued to burn on its own. Kevik and the staff. So, I did that because I didn't want these guys to get too powerful. See, I want them to... It's more fun and interesting when low-level characters have to figure out ways to survive. Once they get super powerful, it's not as exciting anymore. Like James. When James first started out, overcoming everything was good. But now, he's got a good handle on magic. He can do magic. He's very versatile at it. And he's very powerful. So, you get to the point to where it's not as exciting. Still exciting. Still interesting. Still worth reading. But you're not worried that you're going to die in every encounter anymore. These guys here, a strong wind will knock them over. And I will consider, his staff goes downriver, right, in Goblin territory. Maybe at some point it'll resurface in the hands of a Goblin Witch Doctor. Who knows? Maybe in the next series. And there could be a next series. Now, I would really like to write it, but I don't get many sales. I get like 2 or 3 sets, maybe a month. I think this month is about the best month I've had, and I've still only got like 5. And that's probably because of this. But I don't know, because I've only got like 5, 6 people going through it. I'm like over the weekend, the taps I did over the weekend got like 4, 5 views. So it's a good story, and a lot of people, and some people like it, but not enough have gotten into it to warrant me to spend a lot of time in writing the next series. Slowly at first, they added more wood to the flames until they had a roaring fire going on the landing. By this time, some of Bart's energy had returned, and he sat up and scooted closer to get warm. The 4 comrades sat in the fire's warm glow as they stripped down to their smalls and dried their things out. "Our food's gone," announced Kevik. He held up 4 strips of dried beef. Everything else had been ruined by being submerged. "This is all we have left. Once we get out of here, food won't be that much of a problem," Ryan said as he patted his sling. "But getting out of here will," Chad said. Then he pointed over to the mouth of the passage. "What do we do if that doesn't lead anywhere?" "Get back in the water and swim," replied Bart matter-of-factly. None relished that possibility. They didn't even have a pier. They didn't even have a pier this time to turn into a makeshift raft. What was left of the one at the landing was barely enough to keep the fire going. "Anyone look into it yet?" Bart asked, indicating the passage. "Just peeked in through the entrance," Ryan said. It continued farther than what the lantern's light revealed. Bart nodded. Then he asked Kevik what happened to him after he fell down the shaft. For the next hour, they heard his tale, and then in turn told of what they had gone through and what they found. They showed him the various items they took from the treasure room. He was especially interested in the wand. "Do you know what it does?" asked Ryan. "No," he admitted, and I'm not about ready to find out either. He glanced at the others before continuing. "I'm about used up, magically speaking. I've done more magic since I met you than I had the month prior to our meeting. Hopefully you won't be called upon to do any more for a while," Bart said. "That would be good," he replied. "I need a break." When half of their wood supply had been consumed, they banked the fire and put their semi-dry clothes back on. Then they made ready to explore the passage. "Think the key could be down there?" Ryan asked Bart. Shrugging, he said maybe. Bart took the lead. Swinging his mostly dry pack onto his back, he picked up the lantern and moved through the passage. Okay, hang on a second. Okay. Swinging his mostly dry pack onto his back, he picked up the lantern and moved to the passage. His muscles still felt the effects of what he had put them through, but at least they no longer constantly complained. They just gave off with a dull ache now and then, along with a feeling of fatigue. He entered the passage and found it to be constructed similar to the ones above. It extended forward easily 40 feet before turning to the right, then another 10 feet before they came to the top of a stairway leading down. Bart followed the steps with the others right behind. At the bottom, the steps ended at another passage which descended for a short ways before ending at a plain room. It was twice as wide as it was long. No ornamentation, no engravings, nothing. Simply bare rock. The only thing in the room was a plain 4-foot marble pedestal situated in the center of the room. When they came close to it, they saw that the top of the pedestal bore the insignia that was engraved on all the coins. Well, isn't this just lovely? Ryan commented. Someone beat us to it. Damn, exclaimed Chad. Looks like they took it when they fled here, observed Bart, which would make sense. Well, where would they have taken it? Ryan asked. Bart shrugged. He glanced around the room another time, then began moving around the pedestal. You think there could be a secret compartment? Ryan asked hopefully. I doubt it, he replied. This all has the look of where it would have rested. He had almost completed his circuit of the pedestal when the floor opened up beneath him. Damn, he cried as he reached out. His left hand grasped hold of the opening's edge, and the sudden halt of his fall knocked the lantern from out of his other. Just as he brought his hand up to join his right hand up to join his left in hanging on, the lantern smashed against the bottom of the shaft. The others were right there a second later and helped him back up out of the pit. They looked down at the bottom, a good 30 feet below, where the sole lantern lay busted. The base of the lantern had ruptured when it hit, and burning oil covered most of the ground down there. Now what? Chad asked. Then he groaned as Kevik's light sphere appeared and began bobbing about. It's better than the dark, Ryan said. Not by much, replied Chad. Bart stared down at the flames. He sighed and was about to turn away when something caught his eye. At first he wasn't exactly sure what it was, only that something was other than it should be. Then he finally figured it out. One side of the pit at the bottom, near the flames, was darker than the others. It could be a passage. Well, 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 he said with a grin. What? Asked Ryan as he and the others came to see what he was talking about. Bart directed their gaze to the bottom of the shaft. Look there, to the right. He said, I think that's a passage. A passage? Asked Chad. Isn't that sort of a dumb place for one? Bart shook his head. Actually, I think it's a pretty ingenious place for one, he countered. If the lantern hadn't dropped, we never would have suspected it was there. Then he turned to Ryan. And what would we have done then? Left thinking that the key was gone, he guessed. Precisely, he exclaimed. I would bet every bit of treasure we have found so far that the key lies somewhere down that passage. But how are we to get there? Asked Kevik. It's pretty far. Simple, explained Bart. If you're up for one more of your goose spells, you could use it to adhere the end of the rope up here while we climb down. He looked at Kevik until he nodded that he could. Excellent. How long does it last? Up to an hour, he said, if I don't dispel it first. That should give us enough time, he said. Then he began preparing his rope. You three may wish to leave your packs up here, he told him. Make it easier for you to shinny down the rope. They took off their packs and set them by the base of the pedestal. When Kevik had his off, he turned to find Bart ready with the rope. He had placed its end at the edge of the pit, directly over the opening of the passage below. The end of the rope rested a foot from the edge. Just cast it there, Bart told him as he pointed to the end of the rope. Kevik nodded and cast his spell. A green globule appeared atop the rope and quickly adhered to the stone. By the time the goo finished settling, some of it had oozed over the edge of the pit. Bart tugged the rope hard, but the goo wouldn't release it. Good enough, he said. I'll go down first. Once I'm there, I'll holler up, and then you follow one at a time. Man, that goo spell, when I started it, I thought it would just be kind of interesting, but man, it's turned into a lifesaver. I don't know what how I would have done this if he hadn't had that goo spell. I'm trying to figure something else out. Bart probably would have tied the rope around the pedestal and gone down. And in fact, that's how constructors of this place intended it. They would bring a rope or a rope ladder, secure it to the pedestal, put it in the pit, go down, and that's how they do it. But it did seem pretty quick for them to think, oh, this is the key room, right? Nothing in there indicated it, but yet they believed that. So, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it. In the context of the story, it might be believable that they felt that, but nothing special about the room. I don't know why they would have thought that, but yet they do. I'm leaving it. I don't want to rewrite it. Bart tugged the rope, but the goo wouldn't release it. Good enough, he said. I'll go down first. Once I'm there, I'll holler up, and then you follow one at a time. The others nodded. He then went to the edge of the pit and lowered himself over the edge. Before he disappeared out of sight, he pointed to where the green goo oozed over the side. Be careful of that. You get stuck, and you may have to stay there until we're done. Then he dropped out of sight as he descended quickly down the rope. The smoke in the shaft was annoying, but not overwhelming as the lantern oil burned. He had to make sure that when he landed at the bottom, that he didn't settle onto a burning patch. Foot by foot, he continued his descent. When he neared the bottom, he could feel the heat from the flames. Glancing down, he saw the opening just below him and the pool of burning oil on the floor before it. He came up with an idea. Moving to the side of the opening, he worked his way down a little farther. Then just before he reached the floor, he kicked against the wall with his feet. Angling slightly over toward the opening, he swung outward and then came back into the mouth of the opening. Once past the pool of burning oil, he came to land a good foot from the edge of the flames. He moved back as far as he could and stuck his head out of the passage. I'm down, he hollered back up at the others. At the top of the shaft, the others glanced at each other. Who's next? Chad asked. When no one else volunteered, Ryan said, I'll go. Then you, Kevik. When Kevik nodded, Ryan moved to the edge of the pit and grabbed the rope. Edging ever so gently over the side, he made sure to avoid coming into contact with the green goo. Then he entered the pit. He had a few heart-stopping moments on his way down before he reached the passage opening. Once there, Bart grabbed hold of him and helped him in avoiding the flames. Next came Kevik and then Chad. Once they were all down, Kevik's bobbing sphere appeared among them. Stay close, Bart told them as he took the lead. The passage extended straight away from the pit for over 100 feet before coming to a room very similar to the one with the pedestal. Only this time, there wasn't a pedestal. Instead, there were 3 doors set into the far wall about 3 feet apart. When Ryan saw the doors, he asked, I take it only one door will open to where we want to go. That's the way I would figure it, replied Bart. The other 2, I'm sure, will be trapped in some way. Joy, groaned Chad. To Ryan and Chad, Bart said, You 2 wait out in the passage. What about me? Asked Kevik. I need your light, so you're staying with me, he explained. Kevik did not like the sound of that. Very well, he replied with little enthusiasm. With Kevik's light bouncing about, Bart moved to the doors and began an examination of each. He fervently hoped that they would give him some indication which one would be safe to open. But after 10 minutes of fruitless searching, he came up with nothing. Guess we'll just have to open them and hope for the best, he said. Do you think that's wise? Asked Kevik. Not in the least, Bart replied. Which one should we open first? Kevik looked at him in shock. You want me to pick? Sure, Bart said with a grin. I can't tell which one, so your guess is as good as any. He glanced over to Ryan and Chad, but they were no help. Turning back to Bart, he said, The left one? Left it is, said Bart. He then moved to the left door and grabbed the handle. Turning it ever so slowly, he braced himself to dart backward if things went bad. When nothing happened, he slowly pulled the door open. As the door opened, they heard a grinding noise coming from the other side. He glanced to the others questioningly, then pulled the door all the way open. The door opened onto a wall of stone that was beginning to sink into the ground. Could be opening the way to the key, suggested Ryan. Bart didn't think so, but kept his opinion to himself. Then all of a sudden, drops of water appeared at the top of the door. Then the drops became drips that steadily increased in volume and speed. "Oh my God!" Bart yelled as he shut the door quickly. "It's opening up a conduit for the river to enter." He then motioned for Ryan and Chad to come forward. "You two hold this door," he said. "If you don't, we'll all drown." So yeah, so they were on the river was up there and they descended down. So now they're below the river. That's a pretty clever trap, right? Flood the area and then they can't go any further. I'm not sure how they would. I'm not sure how the builders would fix that, right? But it makes a pretty good story. Because if say that guy say that went down, I guess that there has to be another mechanism that would push it back up again. That would make sense, right? Somewhere there's a counterweight that is going up, causing that to come down, and then when it's reset, a massive counterweight to push it against the weight of the water. And then they'd have to drain it. I wonder how they would drain it. Good question. But I'm not going to worry about it right now. They came up with their shoulders against it as Bart turned to the other two doors. He didn't think it would be the middle one, as it was in close proximity to the water trap. So he tried the door on the right. It was locked. He placed his pack on the ground and quickly removed his picks. That's when he noticed water beginning to pool on the floor. He glanced at the door Ryan and Chad held shut and saw a steady stream of water seeping through the cracks all around the door. "Can you hold it?" he asked. Ryan nodded, but he could see that he and Chad were under great strain in keeping the door closed. Returning to the locked door, he quickly removed his two picks and set to work on the lock. In a matter of seconds, he held it open. He opened his pack. He replaced his picks in the rolled leather and placed them back in his pack. Then he pulled the door quickly open. On the other side was another long passage ascending away. "Cabot, come with me," he said. Then to Ryan and Chad, he added, "I'll be back." Ryan only nodded. When Kevin followed along behind, he practically flew down the passage as he knew time was rapidly running out. The passage went for over 100 feet before ending abruptly at a sigil-inscribed wall. He was quick to recognize it as identical in nature to what they had found at the bottom of the crypt. The only difference was that in the middle of the sigils were 4 separate indented spaces. Each of the indented spaces was curved and sank 3 inches into the wall, with a 2-inch space separating it from its neighbors. Looking at the spaces together, they appeared to form a circle. "What is that?" "Well, what is that?" Kevin asked. Bart turned and looked at him. "It's what we came here for." He examined the spaces more closely. Upon the stone within the backs of the spaces were engravings. Then he had Kevin come closer so his bobbing sphere could illuminate them better. He discovered that the engravings were of the 4 coats of arms that they had seen at the bottom of the crypt. The dragon sword, the 2-headed falcon, the one with the stripe running from the upper left corner diagonally to the bottom right, and the 5-pointed crown that they believed belonged to the king himself. In his mind's eye, he pictured the key that they had in their possession. He had studied it enough while lying in Ryan's bed recovering from the poison. It looked as if their part of the key would fit snugly into any one of those spaces. But would just one work? His mind raced over the problem. He knew he didn't have much time. "Bart," Kevin began, but Bart waited quiet. He had to concentrate. There were 4 spaces, which could only mean there were 4 segments of the key. If that supposition was correct, and one of the segments lay beyond this wall, then why have 4 spaces in the wall? Obviously, you couldn't use a key segment lying beyond the wall to open the wall. It had to mean something else. "Bart," Kevin said again, this time with a little more urgency. "Not now," Bart said sternly back at him. The segments of the key had to be magical in nature. Of that he was positive. What if the sigils inscribed upon the wall were set to recognize the various keys? Maybe by placing one in its correct space upon the wall, that would cause a secret door to open? It was worth a shot. Then he remembered that their segment was sitting way back above the shaft where Ryan and the others had left their packs. Turning around, he started to tell Kevin to follow when his foot splashed in water. There was over an inch of water on the floor. He glanced up to Kevin, who said, "That's what I was trying to tell you." "Come on," Bart yelled. "We haven't much time." Racing back down the passage, They splashed through the water until they returned to the room where Riyan and Chad held the door against the water. "Tell me you have it," Riyan hollered when Bart and Kevin entered the room. Water now flowed steadily through the cracks in the door, and it looked like the door was beginning to bow in from the pressure on the other side. "Almost," he replied. "I need the key we found." He and Kevin started to race back down the passage to the shaft when Riyan hollered for him to stop. "It's not up there," Riyan said. "It's in my belt pouch." Bart looked and saw that his belt pouch was bulging pretty good. He had thought it was the many coins he had found. "Thank goodness," he said, and moved to get it. "What's going on?" asked Chad. "I'll tell you when we get out of here," he replied. Undoing the string holding the pouch closed, he reached in and pulled forth the key. Light from the bobbing sphere reflected off its shiny surface. He caught Kevik's eyebrows arch when he saw it. "Back we go," he announced. Then they raced back down the passage to the wall. When he reached the wall, he started to put the key segment into one of the spaces, then stopped. What if he put it in the wrong one? Which one was the right one? Then he glanced at the key segment and saw the sigils. Perhaps they would align with those crisscrossing the wall before him. Testing that theory, he moved it closer to the wall and placed it before each of the spaces to see which would line up with the sigils best. As it turned out, the space with the 5-pointed crown was a perfect match. Hoping he was understanding this correctly, he inserted the key into the wall. As soon as he inserted the key, all the way to the back of the space, the sigils surrounding it flared. Then the wall to his right began rising into the ceiling. "Yes!" he yelled. Once the wall was up far enough, he ducked under and passed through to the other side. It was a bare and nondescript room with but a single pedestal rising out of the middle of the floor. His eyes lit up as he saw lying there before him on the pedestal. His eyes lit up as he saw lying there before him on the pedestal an exact duplicate of the one found in the room above. His eyes lit up as he saw His eyes lit up as he saw, lying there before him on the pedestal, another segment of the key. Grinning, he moved forward and picked it up. After what he had just gone through to open this place, it was quite unlikely that there would be a trap. Once he held the segment in hand, he quickly put it in his pack and left the room. The water covering the floor was several inches deep now, and it was time to leave. He went to the 4 recesses and used his knife to pry out the first segment. Once it was out, the wall slid back down to hide the secret room. "Let's get out of here," he said to Kevik, and then broke into a run back to where they had left Riyan and Chad. Back at the room, they were still holding the door with all their might, but it continued to gradually bow inward. The water flowing from the cracks around the door was no longer a trickle, it was more like a steady stream. Bart and Kevik ran back into the room. "Got it!" Bart yelled triumphantly. "Now let's get out of here." Riyan and Chad glanced at each other and simultaneously let go of the door. No sooner had they let it loose than the water on the other side broke through. The water burst through the door with such power that it knocked the door from its hinges and slammed it into Riyan and Chad. When the door hit them, they went down with a cry as a veritable torrent of water shot through the opening. It was as if the entire river had been diverted to flow through that doorway. "Riyan!" Bart yelled as he saw them go down. The water pushed him back as it rapidly filled the room and the passages of this level. "Kevik, help me!" Riyan broke the surface, but there was no sign of Chad. Bart immediately dove under the water and groped with his hands until he found him. He then pulled Chad upward and Chad gave out with a groan as he broke through to the surface. Kevik appeared beside him, and together they managed to keep Chad above water. "Are you two okay?" Riyan nodded, but Chad looked like he was in some serious pain. "We have to make it to the shaft," Bart yelled over the roar of the water. Already, the water level was chest high and rising. "Help Chad!" Riyan came forward and together with Carrick, helped Chad into and then down the long passage leading to the shaft that led up to the pedestal room on the next level. Keep going, yelled Bart. When Kevin paused to look back at him, he saw Bart had hold of the door. That had broken off and was pushing it along the surface of the water after them. There was no time to wonder what he was going to do with it, as the water was now up to their chins, with only another foot of space between reaching the ceiling. Urging Chad onward, they drew ever closer to the shaft. All right, this scene here, I think my inspiration probably came from the Poseidon Adventure. You ever see that? That was a good movie. The original one was Gene Hackman. Now the remake was decent, was enjoyable too, but the one with Gene Hackman, that was so good. Red Buttons, and so many big stars in that movie. Bart was finding it increasingly difficult to continue moving the door down the passage. The water was now so high that he didn't have proper leverage on the floor and was beginning to lag behind. He was afraid that he might not make it in time. Ahead of him, he saw that Ryan had already reached the shaft and that Kevik and Chad were right behind him. With but inches separating the water and the ceiling, it was all he could do to continue moving forward and breathe. Finally, he gave up trying to push along the floor and simply began swimming. He kicked and paddled as he pushed the door along until he felt the door being pulled from the other side. The last few feet to the shaft, he was completely submerged as the water had finally completely filled the passage. When he broke through the surface, he found himself in the shaft and the water was raising them quickly to the top. He grabbed his rope that was still attached to the goo spell. Kevik, he hollered, get rid of the goo. He looked up and saw the opening coming fast. Just before they reached the top, he hollered, try to grab your packs. The room up there will fill with water too, as it's beneath the surface of the river. Okay, so they're in the shaft and they're rising up. In my mind, I'm envisioning the movie Journey to the Center of the Earth with James Mason. You know, back in the 60s, I think it was. Anyway, and there's that one scene where the lava is, and they're in that bowl, and the lava's pushing them out. That's what I was thinking of when I wrote that scene. Then the water shot them out, and they were literally thrown into the air before coming to land, just like in the movie. Because when it shot them up, they flew everywhere, right? I don't know how they survived it, but you know, it's a movie. Bart couldn't tell if they managed to get their packs or not, as he was concerned with maintaining contact with the door. But in the churning water, he lost his hold and couldn't locate it as the water continued to fountain out of the shaft with incredible pressure. The water was a churning torrent that threw them one way then another. When he realized that they would be lucky to make it out with their lives, he hollered, get to the stairs! Looking around, he saw Kevik and Chad were already entering the passage leading to the stairwell. Of Ryan, there was no sign. He knew he had to get out of there. The room was already practically filled with water and would be completely in a matter of seconds. Swimming for the passage, he almost made it when he was bumped into by Ryan coming up from beneath the water. Where did you go? He asked. From beneath the surface. Because beneath the water would be the stone passage, right? It would be the stone, because that would be beneath the water. Where did you go? He asked. Got the packs, Ryan replied with a grin. Then together they swam for the stairs. The water quickly filled the room and pushed them along the stairwell. It took them almost to the top before the rising water subsided. Kevin and Chad were the first to climb out of the water and onto the stairs, with Bart right behind. Ryan brought up the rear, dragging their 3 packs with him. He saw the rope coiled around Bart's arm. They made it to the top of the stairs, then collapsed. And that's it. That's the end of chapter 26. Kind of a long one, but it was really exciting. It had a lot of good moments in it. Bart messing with the door, he was thinking long term. He was thinking that when they got back out and on the river, they would need something to float or at least hold on to as they go down the river. And he thought the door would prove useful in that endeavor. And He doesn't have it right now. Will they have it? I don't know. I don't remember. Frankly, I remember a little bit about this, about the ending. But we've only got 3 chapters left. So we've got three more days and we're done with this. Then I'll start an Adventures Guild. Yeah. This was a good chapter. Last night I reworked it quite a bit. It was pretty rough. But yeah, I smoothed it out. I made things more logical. And I think it sounds better now than it did before I got to it. So, chapter 27 tomorrow. Oh, so personal stuff now. A couple days ago, I don't know if I told you guys this yesterday, but I'm gonna tell it again because it's really interesting. I'm out mowing my lawn, all right, and I got like an acre or more of lawn to mow. I tend to mow. I use a push mower. I don't use a riding mower. We have one, but I don't use it. Point is, exercise, lose weight, get into better shape. When I moved to Boswell, there were far too many people who rode mowers with a big fat butt, right? And I thought, man, only fat people ride mowers. I mean, they don't, obviously. But the impression I got at that point was that every time I drove into town, someone was riding a mower, they were fat. And I thought, well, I guess they don't get much exercise. And so I thought, well, but if I pushed a mower, and you burn a lot of calories pushing a mower, especially when it's 95 degrees out with 95% humidity. No, 75 degrees out. Because at 95 degrees, there's no grass. So I mow, and then way down there, we have a barn out in the back field, and I keep the road out to it mowed, and we have some berry bushes out there. Well, last year I had carved an area around the blackberry bushes so we could pick the blackberries. Well, this year I started mowing the area around there so to keep it clear, right? Well, in the ground was this little hole, and an armadillo, as I'm leaps out of this hole. I mean, launches himself 2 feet in the air, and I'm like, he is less than a foot from me. He's like, it scared me so bad. I about fell back in the berry bushes. Anyway, he hit the ground and he ran off. That was interesting. That's my first armadillo I've seen this year, but I know where he lives now. So if I want to see him again, I know how to get him. Well, guess that's it. All right. So chapter 27. Thank you for hanging with me. Like, subscribe. Oh, I got a new subscriber, so I'm at 145 now. On my way. They just keep rolling in. You'll have a good day. We'll talk to you later.